Shabbat Shalom. My name is Noel, and as you guys can see, I am here with Miss Pamela tonight. This is a special night because two things. We are starting, we've finished Bereshith, and that's Genesis. That took 12 weeks. I can't believe, as I say, like every week, the Torah portions show little mercy. They just keep charging ahead. They throw 6 chapters at you at a time, and you just are like, it's like jump into the deep end of the pool with a leg cramp, sink or swim, try to get through it, try to get as much information out, cram it out as possible. And so we're starting SHAMA'UATH, that would be Exodus. And I assume this will be another like about 12-week portion. And so we're starting out right. We're bringing Pamela on. Pamela is the translator of these Paleo Hebrew books. And so Pamela, thank you for coming on. You can come on every week if you want. I'm so happy that you're here, and I know a lot of people are anxious to hear from you. So before we start reading this tonight, if there's anything you want to start out with, take it away. And
well, I want to thank you first for the opportunity. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Noel, and to the Unexpected Cosmology bookstore for giving me this opportunity and for publishing me. When I started translating, I started with the Psalm project. I started working with the Psalms, and I never ever imagined that anyone would read it. I was doing it for myself because this was not long after I came to Torah, and when I realized that Elohayim's instructions for righteous living were true and applicable for us today. And I realized that I needed to know if this is true. If I need to be paying attention to the Torah, then I need to know what's really being said in the scripture. And I started working with the Paleo, and Noel was like, he gave me this opportunity to publish some of the poems first on his website and then later as a collection. And so it's exciting. It's been a little bit of a wild ride because some of the stuff that I've discovered is just, it's been shocking and mind-blowing. The difference between what you see in the Paleo and what you see when you go back to the etymology of the words, what's really being said. And so Bereshith was a little bit more conservative than what SHAMA'UATH is. So I'm taking you on a wild ride with me. So buckle up.
Well, Pamela said it first. Because I was working with Pamela kind of through her Paleo translations, asking her a lot of questions. And I didn't know she was going to translate all of Bereshith first. And when she handed in Bereshith, the final draft, I commented to her that I was like, wow, I feel like you kind of went a little conservative here. Like you could have gone more crazy with this. And so she has assured me that with Exodus, she's going to, kind of go with the flow of the Paleo a little bit more. And it doesn't disappoint this week. I was pleasantly surprised to see Pamela. Yeah, you guys will see for yourself. One of the things I know that Pamela and I were just talking about before we went live, that is a concern of hers, is a concern of mine as well, is something we have seen on the horizons. We've seen building. We have personally seen it in our community with people falling away. And what happens is when a lot of people come over to the Torah, I don't need to get too long-winded on this before getting started because we have a lot we want to talk about tonight, is there's this idea that Yahuwah, or God of the Old Testament, that people come to this idea that he is Satan, and that Satan literally made a covenant with Abraham, that he led them out of Egypt, that he gave them this Torah, and that Jesus, he showed up to free them from that. And what's beautiful about this translation, what Pamela's doing, is showing that it's like, no. Yahweh, Yahuwah, or in the Paleo, Yahuwah is the Son. He was always the Son. The entity, the Allah Hayam, who gave the Torah on Sinai, who led them out of Egypt, who made the covenant with Abraham, and going on forward here, what is the same Mashiach, Yahushua HaMashiach. So let's dive right into this. And I'm going to, because you guys know how this works, is that I have a lot of notes and I could talk for probably 3 hours. I cut it off at 2 hours. I want to give Pamela as much time as she wants tonight, and I don't know how much time she wants. I was trying to gauge this beforehand, so I'm going to try to reserve most of my notes for the end. Once Pamela's kind of had her fill, I want to give her as much time as possible. And I mean, maybe for selfish reasons on my end, because I want to hear what she has to say. We don't get on her very often. So I'll keep it as minimal as possible. But starting out, I want to talk really quickly about the death of the patriarchs. And let's see here. How can I show this without having the words blocked by the screen? Okay, well, let's see here. I just realized I don't have a lot of space here. Let's do this. Boom, there we go. Okay, now we have more space. All right. So going really quickly here, the 12 patriarchs, they're all in Mitzrayim. They're dying off slowly. Last week I went through the testament of the patriarchs, and each one of these testimonies were given on their deathbed. We know that Yaakov, he had his prophecy for the 12 sons, and then each of these 12 sons, they also have their deathbed confessions. I went through most of those, or portions of them. We see here, after announcing his last will to his sons, Reuben departed this life at the age of 125 years, and his body was laid in a coffin until his sons bore it away from Egypt and carried it up to Hebron, where they buried it in the double cave. All right. Same thing with Yehuda. He too was, he says here, now none shall bury me in a costly garment, nor shall ye cut my body to embalm it, but ye shall carry me to Hebron. So that's kind of interesting how Yaakov, or Yasharel, was embalmed. And here you have Yehuda saying, no, you're not going to embalm me. You just put me in a coffin, put me in eventually the bone box, take me back to Hebron. Same thing with Yishakar when he died. He goes back. Zebulun, he's carried to Hebron as well. Dan, let's see what he says here. Having spoken these words, he kissed his children and fell asleep. Okay, well, it doesn't say what happened to him, but we're assuming that he was also carried back. Let's see, Naphtali. Then he ate and drank with rejoicing, covered his face and died, and his sons did according to all that their father Naphtali had commanded them. Oh, yeah, no, he says he charged. Let's see, I jumped to the end there. It says at the beginning, Naphtali charged his children thus, and with many other lessons like these, he enjoined them to carry his remains to Hebron, to be buried there near his fathers. We see the same thing with Asher. He commanded them to bury him in Hebron. With Benjamin, let's see, he fell asleep at a good old age, and they put his body into a coffin. And oh, this is interesting. Yeah. So, and in the 91st year of the sojourning in Egypt, so they've been there 91 years at this point. So he's over 100 years old. His sons and the sons of his brethren brought up the bones of their father in secrets. So we're learning some new information here. So we're learning for the first time that as these patriarchs are dying, they're being carried to Hebron, but it's done in secret, and buried them in Hebron at the feet of their fathers. Then they returned from the land of Canaan, and they dwelt in Egypt until the day of the exodus from the land. And these all comes from the legends of the Jews. And of course, they're sourcing Jasher here. Now, I am of the opinion at this time, fine if I'm proven wrong, but I feel that this is actually Levi. When it's talking about the people going back to bury them, every single time it's a Levi. I'm going to be bringing this up a lot tonight, because all the other tribes sold themselves. They allowed themselves to go into slavery. Levi never did. Levi is the only tribe that they're like, nope, we're not going into slavery. And nobody seems to ask the question, how is it that all of Israel is in slavery, and yet Moshe and Aaron are allowed to walk around? They aren't told to go to the fields. Well, they're the tribe of Levi. Levi never entered the fields to work. And so Levi is the one that is able to go back and bury the dead. Now, with Yosef, it's a different story. And this is actually quoting from Yasher this time around. And Yosef was 110 years old when he died in the land of Mitzrayim. And all his brethren and all his servants rose up and they embalmed Yosef. So that's interesting. So the other brothers are like, don't embalm me. But Yosef gets embalmed, as was their custom, and his brethren and all Egypt mourned over him for 70 days. We're seeing a replay with the Yaakov situation where there was, I think it was the 70 number, then the 40, and then the 7. And they put Yosef in a coffin filled with spices and all sorts of perfume, and they buried him by the side of the river. So he's the first that's not carried back to Hebron. He's put in the Nile. That is Sihor. That's what I guess they call the river. So maybe, some people could argue it's not the Nile, the wrong location. I don't really know. And his sons and all his brethren and the whole of his father's household made a 7 days mourning for him. So there's that number again. We don't get the 40, but we get 70 and 7. And it came to pass after the death of Yosef, all the Egyptians began in those days to rule over the children of Israel. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who reigned in his father's stead, took all the laws of Egypt and conducted the whole government of Egypt. Okay. We'll read this one more passage. This is, so back to Legends of the Jews. So we read with Benjamin, they were taken back there secretly. So here's what we read about Shimon. Having completed his admonitions to his sons, and this is when he's speaking his last rites on his bed, Shimon passed away and was gathered to his fathers at the age of 120 years. His sons placed him in a coffin made of imperishable wood, so that they might carry his bones to Hebron, as they did in secret during the war between the Egyptians and the Canaanites. So now we've gotten more information. They're doing it in secret. And I told you, I think it's Levi that's doing it. I'm not so sure that the other tribes at this point, maybe they hadn't been sold into slavery yet. I'm not sure on the timeline, but I feel it's Levi doing it. They're doing it in secret. And now we know, added information, there's a war between Egypt and Canaan going on. Thus did all the tribes during the war. They took the remains, each of its founder from Egypt to Hebron. Well, maybe that just solved the riddle for me. It was each of the tribes, but that's not the point. Only the bones of Joseph remained in Egypt until the Israelites went out of the land, where the Egyptians guarded them in the royal treasure chambers. The magicians had warned them that whenever Joseph's bones should be removed from Egypt, a great darkness would envelop the whole land. That's kind of interesting because that's referring to the one of the last plagues. And it would be a dire misfortune for the Egyptians, for none would be able to recognize his neighbor, even with the light of a lamp. So that's from Legends of the Jews right there. So one of the reasons, according to this, that it was actually the Israelites would have, either Ephraim, Manasseh, would have taken Joseph back to be buried, but the Egyptians forbade it. They actually guarded it because they knew that there was a prophecy that once forget the other brothers, but once he gets up and goes, it's the end of them. All right. Now, this is a really interesting text right here. I'm going to read through, and I promise we're going to get into the Torah portions real quick. This is all background to what we're going to go into today. And this is the visions of Amram. And this is Moshe's father. And this goes into what was going on with the burying of the patriarchs and the war between Egypt and Canaan. So Kahat went there to stay and dwell in Beld. So this Kahat, if I'm pronouncing it right, he is a son of Levi, making Amram the grandson of Levi. And of course, Amram marries an actual daughter of Levi. So she marries her nephew. And that's, of course, Moshe's mother. Kahat went there to stay and dwell in Beld, many of the sons of my uncle together. So this was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while, but this is coming from Amram is giving his testimony. And I would imagine that a lot of these people probably gave their testimonies and probably very few survived. Obviously, the 12 patriarchs survived. But so Kahat went there to stay and dwell and build, many of the sons of my uncle together. A man as our work was very great until the dead would be buried. In the year of my beginning, when the news of a war became worrying, so there's news of an impending war between Canaan and Egypt. With my consent, our company returned to the land of Egypt, and I went to bury them, and they did not build the tombs of our fathers. And my father Kahat and my wife Jochebed left me to stand and build and provide them with all their needs from the land of Canaan. I find this exchange a little bit confusing because it makes it seem like he's in Egypt and Jochebed's in Canaan, even though we find out that he's in Canaan and Jochebed is back in Mitzrayim. And we stayed in Hebron. So now he's saying, he is now in Hebron while we were building. And the war broke out between the Philistines and the Egyptians. And the Philistines and Canaanites defeated the Egyptians, and they closed the frontiers of Mitzrayim. They closed the border. Can't cross now. So he's stuck. And it was impossible for Jochebed, my wife, to go from Egypt to Canaan for 41 years. So the father and mother of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam are separated for 41 years. I mean, I've been married for how many years now? 22 years almost. That seems like an eternity. This seems like a long time, 22 years. And some people make it to the 50th or maybe even the 60th anniversary. But man, they're separated for 41 years. And we could not return to Mitzrayim. Therefore, we could not, ... unfinished sentence, the war between Egypt and Canaan and the Philistines. And during all this, Jochebed, my wife, was away from me in the land of Mitzrayim. Something about his post, he had to stay at his post, for she was not with me. And I did not take another wife. Quite the romantic. Something about women, we don't know, but he apparently didn't take any other women, certainly not amongst the Canaanites. Of course, all the Hebrews would have been back in Egypt. That I would return to Egypt in peace and would see the face of my wife. So apparently he's looking forward to seeing her face again. This is where it gets really interesting. He said, this is where we see the watchers show up. He said, I saw watchers in my vision, a dream vision, and behold, two of them argued about me and said, so in this, I am of the opinion that the watchers are of course, like reptilians. They're the Anunnaki, probably seraphim angels. And so you're seeing here a good reptilian and an evil reptilian. You're seeing dualism. These two watchers are arguing, a righteous one and an unrighteous one. And behold, two of them argued about me. That's quite the thing you want to see in bed, right? You're having a vision and you're seeing these two angelic entities arguing over your fate. You're like, I'm right here. I can hear you. And they were engaged in a great quarrel concerning me. I asked them, what are you thus, what are you discussing or arguing about me? And they answered and said to me, we have been made masters and rule over all the sons of men. And they said to me, which of us do you choose? I raised my eyes and saw one of them. His looks were frightening, like those of a viper. So he's describing it like a snake creature, a viper. And his garments were multicolored, and he was extremely dark. And afterwards I looked, and behold, by his appearance, and his face was like that of an adder, which of course, again, is a snake, a serpent. And he was covered with, we don't know, but something was over his eyes. And ... this watcher, who is he? He said to me, this watcher. So I think he's asking the righteous one now. He's asking the righteous watcher. He's like, who is this other dark serpentine watcher? And he said, this watcher, his three names are Belial, Prince of Darkness, and Milkarisha. And I said, my Adonai, what rule? And he said to me, there's a lot of dots. If you're listening, I'm sorry if you're not looking at the screen. And all his paths are darkness, and all his work is darkness, and he is in darkness. And he rules over all darkness, and I rule over all light. That's all we have in this document. It's just a very mysterious document. I want to share this with you because it goes right into the birth of Moshe. And so, yeah, before he went back to Mitzrayim and had his three children, he had this wild vision of these two watchers who were arguing over his fate as he's stuck in this war. It's a really crazy scene. All right, so let's get right into this. I'm going to get this down, Pamela. SHAMA'UATH, if I'm pronouncing that right.
SHAMA'UATH.
SHAMA'UATH. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 22. I'll give this a read, and then I'm going to hand it over to you for whatever first commentary you want tonight. The names of the 12 patriarchs. These are the names of the sons of Yasharel who came to Mitzrayim. The chief Yaakov and his family with him. We see Reuben, Simon or SHAMA'UATH, Levi or Uiah, and Yehuda, Yishakar, Zebulun, and Benu Yamayan. Dan, Naphtali or Naphtali. Yeah, you think I'd have this down by now. Gad and Asher, and existed all the Nephesh proceeding from the loins of Yaakov, 70 persons. Basically saying that yes, there were 12 sons, but they had children, so there's 70 of them all together going down to Mitzrayim. Yosef existed already in Mitzrayim, so I guess it's not counting him and his 2 sons. Now Yosef and all his brothers expired and all their children, but the offspring of Yasharel were fruitful and became very, very powerful, and the land was filled with them. Then an unheard of foreign conqueror arose over the Mitzrayim who knew nothing of Yosef. And I would love to hear you comment on that too, because that's interesting there that you put in foreign conqueror. I don't have the Masoretic lined up with me, but does it say foreign conqueror in the Masoretic?
It says a new or strange malak, but malak, besides meaning king or messenger, it can also mean like a leader of an army. Okay. So he was a leader of armies. Okay. This person who came in.
Well, this foreign conqueror, this leader of armies, knew nothing of Yosef, and he declared unto his nation, "This people, the sons of Yasharel, are more in number and stronger than we. Therefore, let us deal wisely with them to prevent them increasing. For it is possible they might call out war and turn to join our haters and maybe fighting against us and expel us from Ha'aratz, or the earth." They consequently placed labor masters over them to force them to build. And they built fortresses for Pharaoh, Phathom and Ramesses. But the more they oppressed them, the more they increased, meaning they just kept sprouting children. Therefore, they trembled and feared before the sons of Yasharel. Consequently, the Matzariah, or the Mitzrayim Egyptians, endeavored to crush the sons of Yasharel. So they embittered their lives by cruel labor in the forges and in the brick kilns and in every labor upon the land, by every means possible trying to crush them. The king of Mitzrayim also summoned the midwives of the Hebrews, of whom the name of the chief was Shapharah, which that seems pretty similar. Yeah.
It's very similar to like sapphire.
Okay. And the name of her lieutenants, how do you pronounce that? The name of her lieutenant?
Fa'u'aiha.
I'm just going to have you pronounce all the names. This is great. And he decreed, when you cause the Hebrew women to bring forth, observe their children. If it is a son, slay him. If it is a daughter, let her exist. But the midwives feared Allahayam and did not do as the king of Mitzrayim ordered them, but preserved the children alive. The king of Mitzrayim therefore summoned those midwives again and inquired from them, "Why have you not executed the plan, but have preserved the male's children's lives?" This is where Hebrew women get their reputation from this passage here. When the midwives replied to Pharaoh, "Because they are not like Mitzrayim women when in labor, but lively, so that they bring forth before the time that the midwives have come unto them." And so Hebrew women will still say this to this day, that before the midwives show up, many times the children are there. Therefore, Allahayam showed kindness to those midwives. So the people increased and were very strong. And seeing that the midwives reverently feared Allahayam, he fashioned to them houses. Pharaoh then commanded this people, declaring, "Every boy that is born, throw him in the river, but let the girls exist." So I put a break there. And Pamela, take it away. Anything you want to talk about in this passage, or any passage for that matter.
All right. Well, we start at the beginning of SHAMA'UATH, and we have a transition. We've had this up until this point, from the time of Abraham until Jacob goes into Egypt. They have been nomads, tent dwellers. So now that they're living in a settled place in Mitzrayim, and so these patriarchs, the patriarchs passed on, and it says that their descendants became Pharaoh, So this means to bear or to increase with offspring. So this is the same word used by Allah Hayam when he says, be fruitful and multiply. That's what they're doing. And then, like the Hebrews, they love to use different words to say the same thing. And it says they abounded, multiplied, sharats. And rabaha, it means that they multiplied, increased, they had much. In Genesis, in SHAMA'UATH, during the famine in Mitzrayim, we know that the sons of Yasharel were provided for by Yahweh, Joseph, and they dwelt on the best land. So they've increased. They have much. And atzam means that it means to bind up, to tie up. And it's, if you can think of, strands of rope that you twist together. And this means it became stronger. So they were already strong and they became stronger. You think of it in terms of twisting a rope, or you take steel cables and wind them together. That's what's happening with the Hebrews. They're becoming more, they're stronger, they're more powerful, and of great importance. So they're strong in number, that is, they became numerous. And then we have this repeat of this word, ba ma'ad, ma'ad. So that means very, very great. They became very, very great, and Aratz was filled with them. So we have this foreign conqueror who comes into the picture. Now, the word here is hadam. And this foreign conqueror, he has no knowledge of Joseph, Yahweh, and he has no notion regarding the debt that Mitzrayim owes to Yahweh, Joseph, because Mitzrayim and all these other nations survived because of the knowledge and wisdom that was given to Yahweh. And the conqueror only sees, he's a conqueror, and so he only sees a potential threat, because he sees that they're very numerous and they're very strong, and they probably had great possessions, because if you remember, the Mitzrayim had sold their possessions to get corn. They had sold their property, they had sold their cattle, and the sons of Yasharel did not. So they continued to own property, and they were settled in the land of Goshen. So he sees this threat, and so he decides he's going to eliminate this threat. And so he establishes leaders or commanders over the Hebrews. This word here is sharaya, and this means noble one, a noble one. And if you recall, that was Sarah's Sharaya. That was her name. It means noble one. So these noble ones are really taskmasters, and the Hebrews were forced into servile labor. They were afflicted, anuha, and made to labor with burdens, sabal, which were wearisome and laborious tasks. They made them to serve with farak, which means oppression and tyranny. They had this, I put it in there, it's this idea they were trying to crush them. They wanted to crush them physically, spiritually, and emotionally. That was the goal, crush them. Well, when that wasn't really working, because we saw that the more they tried to oppress them, the more they tried to crush them, the more that they increased. So when that didn't work, Pharaoh, he changes tactics. And so he orders the midwives to murder all the male newborns. But because the midwives feared Allah Hayam, the conqueror's plan did not work. They obeyed Allah Hayam rather than a human ruler. And he says that Allah Hayam fashioned to them houses. Now that word, Bathu Yatam, it simply means, it's houses, but it can mean more than that. It's more than just a physical dwelling. It means that he gave them family, descendants, offspring. He also gave them property and possessions, wealth. So when finally Pharaoh says, he gives a command for all of his people. I found that was really curious. All his people. What does this mean? Is he telling all of them in Mitzrayim to murder? Throw your children into the river. And you were talking about the word Nile does not appear. It's actually Hayar, and it just simply means the river. Most of the time they meant that to mean, the chief river, I guess the Nile, but it's not definitive. So I didn't put it in there. I didn't put the Nile in there. I put the river. So that's what it says. And that's what I put. So anyway, my question that I pondered in this, I don't know how other people, I'm like wondering, did he give the order for all his people? Is it all the people in Mitzrayim, or is it just the Hebrews? And when it's talking about his people, is he talking about his as in the conqueror's people, or is he talking about his as in Alahayam's people? So that's one of the questions that I've pondered. I don't really have an answer for that. So I'm just telling you, that's some of the things that I ran across. So back to you, Noel. To the next.
I kind of caught myself when I said Nile, because just give context to that for a lot of the people out there in our circles who are investigating whether or not the land of Israel today, 1948 Israel, is the historical land of Yasharel. They're saying it's in other places. And one of the big arguments they bring up is that you can't necessarily take modern Egypt either, and always give the same sort of landmarks like Nile, right? Like the Nile's not there; it's just the river, right?
It's just the river. You can't say it's saying the Nile, because it's just not. It's just not there.
Well, so before I start reading, one of the things that really struck me, let me see if I can pull up this foreign conqueror again. And an unheard foreign conqueror. This is really interesting because I was thinking about this today as I was going through the entire portion, is that we're going to get to it later tonight. Moshe tells Yahuwah, or Alahayam, that his name, like who's he supposed to tell Pharaoh who he is, because his name is not in the records there, if I'm reading that right. And that really struck me, because I'm like, wait a second, Moshe, he's raised in Mitzrayim, so he knows that Yahuwah was not taught there in Egypt. I'm assuming as a god, as a Elohim. But the reason why that's so interesting is because if you go back to like the writings of Abraham, one of the pharaohs there, according to that book, became a Melchizedek priest. Of course, I'm of the opinion that Osiris and Isis, the original Osiris and Isis, the actual historical, were actually righteous, that they were not the evil eye that we see today, that they were actually friends with Shem and actually worked with him in Canaan. And so, but then you even fast forward to Yosef, and here Yosef is second in command, and has a huge influence, and we see him just talking about Yahuwah, and that's his Alahayam. So you would think that there would be some knowledge of this Alahayam, this god in Egypt, and he appears to be completely scrubbed. My point is, it seems like this conqueror coming in, this new pharaoh, is like he's doing some serious scrubbing and erasing of Yahuwah. So, but we'll see as we go forward. All right. So I wanted to read really quickly here from Yashar. And this is, of course, for those of you who have read through Yashar, like for every Torah portion, which is like 5 to 6 chapters, you have like 20 chapters in Yashar. I mean, it's just, you can't go through it all. But this is one of my favorite passages in Yashar, because it talks about how the Israelites became slaves. I mean, we kind of pick up in Egypt that they just became we pick up in Exodus that they kind of became slaves. We don't really know how, but this actually it's eerie, because it shows how we ourselves today in the West, I'd say worldwide, we also have become slaves. And the idea is that you don't necessarily just you don't get forced into it, but you actually have to give your consent. And so we see this generation after generation, how we keep giving more and more consent to be ruled by the government. Going back to like, was it 1936 or 7 with the Social Security numbers, for example, where the government introduces, hey, you could be, you can get a cattle prodded mark here. You can have a Social Security number and you're going to get money out of this. They bribe people and, they just start doing this stuff. So, and all the elders, this comes from Yashar 65, as you can see, and all the elders of Egypt heard the counsel of the king, and the counsel seemed good in their eyes. They're having a conversation with Balaam too. And in the eyes of the servants of Pharaoh and in the eyes of Egypt, and they did according to the word of the king. And all the servants went from, I'm assuming this is maybe that conquering Pharaoh, the new one that steps in. And all the servants went away from the king, and they caused a proclamation to be made in Mitzrayim, in Tachpanches and in Goshen. Of course, Goshen is where the Hebrews are. And in all the cities which surrounded Mitzrayim, saying, you have seen what the children of Esau and Ishmael did to us, who came to war against us and wished to destroy us. That's a whole nother several chapters in Jasher about the war with Esau and Ishmael. Now, therefore, the king commanded us to fortify the land, to build the cities, and to fortify them for battle if they should again come against us. Whosoever of you from all Egypt and from the children of Yasharel will come to build with us, he shall have his daily wages given by the king as he commanded unto us. And when Mitzrayim and all the children of Yasharel heard all that the servants of Pharaoh had spoken, there came from the Egyptians and the children of Yasharel to build with the servants of Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses, but none of the children of Levi came with their brethren to build. So there you go, boom, right there. So we're going to start seeing Yasharel go down the slippery slope of going to slavery, and Levi, they saw it coming, and they're like, we're not doing this. And I can only imagine they were warning everybody else and they weren't listening. And all the servants of Pharaoh and his princes came at first with deceit to build with all Yasharel as daily hired laborers, and they gave to Yasharel their daily hire at the beginning. And the servants of Pharaoh built with all Yasharel and were employed in the work with Yasharel for a month. And at the end of the month, all the servants of Pharaoh began to withdraw secretly from the people of Yasharel daily. It almost reminds me of like the deceit of Yaakov marrying Leah. He thinks he's marrying Rachel, but it's done out of deceit. And everybody else was in the know. They all knew about it. And Yasharel went on with the work at that time, but they then received their daily hire because some of the men of Egypt were yet carrying on the work with Yasharel at that time. Therefore, the Egyptians gave Yasharel their hire on those days, in order that they, the Egyptians, their fellow workmen, might also take the pay for their labor. And at the end of the year, in 4 months, all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Yasharel, so that the children of Yasharel were left alone engaged in the work. They're still not clued into this, apparently. And after all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Yasharel, they returned and became oppressors and officers over them. And some of them stood over the children of Yasharel's taskmasters to receive from them all that they gave them for the pay of their labors. And the Egyptians did this manner to the children of Yasharel day by day in order to afflict in their work. And all the children of Yasharel were alone engaged in the labor, and the Egyptians refrained from giving any pay to the children of Yasharel from that time forward. And when some of the men of Yasharel refused to work on account of the wages not being given to them, then the exactors and the servants of Pharaoh oppressed them and smote them with heavy blows and made them return by force to labor with their brethren. Thus did all the Egyptians unto the children of Yasharel all the days. And the children of Yasharel were greatly afraid of the Egyptians in this manner, and all the children of Yasharel returned and worked alone without pay. And the children of Israel, or Yasharel, built Pithom and Ramses, and all the children of Yasharel did the work, some making bricks and some building. And the children of Yasharel built and fortified all the land of Egypt and its walls. And the children of Yasharel were engaged in work for many years, until the time came when Yahuwah remembered them and brought them out of Egypt. I think that's enough there. There's more to get to. I just want to kind of show you that, yeah. And it gets worse from there. It's like they start, and the Egyptians embittered the lives of the children of Yasharel with hard work and mortar and bricks, and also in all manners of work in the fields. All right. You get the point. All right. Let's move back to, oh yeah, this is really short. So this is getting into, Amram. We already read from the testimony of Amram. So really quickly here, this comes from Yashar chapter 67, leading into the birth of Moshe. There was a man in the land of Mitzrayim of the seed of Levi, whose name was Amram. And Amram, I believe, was the grandson of Levi, as I mentioned, but his wife was the daughter of Levi. So he married his aunt. He was the son of Kehath, the son of Levi, the son of Yasharel. So you see that Amram, Kehath, Levi, Yasharel. And this man went and took a wife, namely Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, his father's sister. And she was 126 years old, and he came unto her. So keep in mind, he didn't marry her at 126. I think that there was that huge 41-year gap. So he married her under 100. Maybe she was like 80 or something. I don't know, but she was old at that time. And when he was finally able to get back to Mitzrayim, she's 126 years old. And this is older than Sarah, Sharaha, at this point. And the woman conceived and bore a daughter, and she called her name Miriam. I turned 43, level 43 last week, and I have a daughter, and she is kicking my butt. I got my wife, Sarah, we comment on this. She's kicking our butt. I mean, we're feeling old. We're 43. We're not young spring chickens anymore. But Jochebed is in her 120s. So hats off to her. And the woman conceived and bore a daughter. She called her name Miriam, because in those days, the Egyptians had embittered the lives of the children of Yasharel. And of course, Pamela, you can attest to this, that Miriam means bitter, right? So
Yes.
It's actually saying that she's born under these bitter circumstances.
Yes.
And it's an interesting theme, right? Because like Miriam is, of course, the mother of Yahusha. It's the same thing. It was born under bitter times with the Romans controlling them. And the woman could go ahead.
I was just going to say that you can see it in male and female names, that root word for bitter, mar, is showing up. I think one of the sons of Aaron he's got that mar in it, Abithmar or something like that. And so bitterness, like when you have the Romans in Yeshua's time, there was a lot of Miriams then, and here at during the time of Mashaha, you have a lot of Miriams because of the bitterness that they're having to live through.
Yeah. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Aaron. For in the days of her conception, Pharaoh began to spill the blood of the male children of Yasharel. All right. Okay, so I'm going to skip all this. You can look at these. I might come back to these pretty pictures later. I'm just going to dig right into the text because I know I'll comment on it later if there's time, but I really want to give Pamela her time. So we're going to start reading, but right back in SHAMA'UATH, chapter 2. We were to chapter 1. Here we go. The birth of Mashaha, or Moshe, and adoption by Pharaoh's daughter. But there was a man from the family of Levi. He took for himself a daughter of Levi. This is what we just read through with Jochebed. And the woman conceived and brought forth a son. When she looked on his beauty, she hid him for 3 months. But being no longer able to hide him, she fashioned a boat of bulrushes and pitched it with pitch and resin and placed it in reeds on the bank of the river. There again, it doesn't say Nile, just river, the big river. But his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, and her maids walked along the bank of the stream. I'll quickly state here and that why was she bathing in the river? Because all evidence, if we're dealing with Egypt that we know today, all evidence points to the fact that they had baths, that they had bath houses. So what's probably happening here is that this bathing is a religious ceremony. The Nile River will overflow, I think, usually in July, and you'll get the tropical rains in is it Ethiopia, and then it comes down, it swells up in Lower Egypt. Remember, Upper Egypt is actually to the south; it's like backwards directions. Lower Egypt is to the north. It will come and swell up. And they're the Elohim of the Nile is Hopi, and they treated it kind of like they like obelisk, right? So they treated it like ejaculation, basically. The idea that this Hopi Elohim is bringing fertility to the land, and so they would, in the flooding of the Nile, is when they would go and do a lot of their spiritual religious ceremonies. Now, Jewish tradition states that Moshe was born in the month of Nisan. I know, Pamela, you have a different name for it. Month of Nisan, when Passover happened. But if this is happening when the Nile was flooding, which I suspect, it would have been more June, July, August time of the year. And so what's happening is she's going down to do this religious ceremony, and lo and behold, the Elohim Hopi, the god of the Nile or the river, he's delivering a baby. When she looked on his beauty, she hid him for 3 months. Oh yeah, I did that. Okay. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, and her maids walked along the bank of the stream. Now, she wasn't stupid. She knew that this was a Hebrew baby. And they noticed the boat amongst the rushes. One of the big giveaways that the baby would have been circumcised. Now, the Egyptians circumcised as well. And the Egyptians circumcised well into Hellenized time, up into Cleopatra. And it's one of the things that was commented on if you ever read the epistle of, I think it was the epistle of Barnabas. And he talks about this, but they didn't circumcise at 8 days old. So if you see a baby circumcised, they'd be like, okay, this is obviously a Hebrew baby. So she stretched out her hand and took it. When she opened it, she saw the lad, and he cried. And she grieved over him and said, it is one of the Hebrew children. Obviously, she lifted up the blanket and saw, lifted up the skirt. Then his sister asked the daughter of Pharaoh, shall I go and seek his sister would, of course, be Miriam, right? Shall I go and seek for you a nursing woman of the Hebrews so that she may nurse the lad for you? It's kind of interesting how she just kind of pops up in the scene. the daughter of Pharaoh goes, and then Miriam she just pops up right there. And the daughter of Pharaoh replied to her, go. So she went immediately and called the mother of the child, to whom Pharaoh's daughter said, take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay you the cost. Its mother therefore took the child and nursed it. When the lad grew up, he was taken to the daughter of Pharaoh as a son, and she called his name Meshaha. Now, I wish I actually had, I guess I'm going to keep reading, but I wish I actually had the passage in Jasher where, interestingly enough, there's a passage where it says, like, Moses had like 12 names. I mean, depending on, like, his father named him something, his mother named him something, I think his sister and the Israelites named him something. But the name here, Meshaha or Moshe, that we have, according to Yasher and according to this right here, comes from the daughter of Pharaoh. So that's really interesting. But it was long after this, when Meshaha had become great, that he went forth into his brothers and examined their condition. Then he saw a Mitzrayim man, striking a Hebrew who was related to him. Then he turned, so this man would be a Levite. Then he turned this way and that way, and not seeing anyone, he struck the Matzariah, the Mitzrayim man, and concealed him in the sand. At another time, when he was observing, there were 2 men, Hebrews, quarreling. So he said to the wrongdoer, why did you strike your neighbor? But he replied, who appointed you as a nobleman and judge over us? Are you going to murder me as you murdered the Mitzrayim? Ouch. Then Meshaha was afraid and said to himself, that affair is known then? The matter was also reported to Pharaoh, who endeavored to execute Meshaha. But Meshaha fled from the face of Pharaoh and turned to the land of Midian, where he rested beside a well. All right, Pamela, handing over to you. Do you have any thoughts on this section?
Oh, yeah. Now, first of all, if you'll notice, we have this moment by the river. And again, like I said, the term here, it's just the river. Now, it was, of course, very important, as Noel said. The river was very important to the Mitzrayim because it provided transportation. It represented the symbol of life and prosperity and merit to these Mitzrayim. And it also, because of the flooding of this river, it fertilized the crops. It made the land very dark and fertile. And because of this reliance upon the river, they actually had all these different deities they would worship these deities to ensure that the annual flooding of the river was sufficient so that they would have a bountiful harvest. Now, many of the scenes that we're going to be seeing, especially in the confrontation between Moses, Mashaha, and Pharaoh, are going to be against a backdrop of water. And it's not by chance. I feel like this is an epic contest between Yahweh, the Elohim of the the children of Yasharal, and against these deities, the lowercase Elohim of Mitzrayim. So this is an epic battle, and the first thing that we see is that we have these two daughters are present. We have the daughter of Levi and the daughter of Pharaoh. Now, in the Aramaic Targum, of course, they identified the daughter of Levi as being Jochebed, and the other people who are present here in this first scene are females, and they're identified in English as handmaids or damsels, but there are different words, and there are subtle differences in the meaning of these words. Now, the first one we're going to look at is Na'iraha, and this is simply just a young girl, probably an adolescent. And as Noel said, they were probably worshiping. It wasn't just that they were going down, we need a bath. No, they're doing some kind of ritual, bathing ritual in the river. So we have Na'iraha, which is a young girl or an adolescent. The next one we have is Amaha. Now, this is a woman. We'll see this later in Exodus, where an Amaha is a woman who is sold into slavery for the intent to bear children. Now, earlier in SHAMA'UATH, Hagar was given to Abraham and Sarah as a Safachaha. And this is a female servant with the intent that she would be a member of the family. Hagar was meant to be part of the family. But of course, Sarah changes her status from being a member of the family to being a Maha. And so that she would bear Ishmael for Abraham. And this was also this Safachaha. This is also what Bilhah and Zilpah were given to Rachel and Leah as a female servant, but that they were supposed to be members of the family. But again, it happens again. Their status is changed from being supposed to be part of the family to becoming an Amaha, which is a bondservant. Becoming a bondservant with the intent to bear children. When Sarah she wants Abraham to expel Hagar, she's talking to her, and she's saying, "You get rid of this Amaha, get rid of this female bondservant." So Amaha is a female that's sold into slavery for the intent of bearing children, and it's different from a male servant. So the next one is an Ilamaha, and the word here, that's what Miriam, the sister of Moses, is called Ilamaha, and this is different. This is a young woman of marriageable age, or a young woman who's newly married. So Miriam here is not a child. She's a young woman of marriageable age, or she's just been married. And like Noel says, she shows up, but I think it's the Targum that says that she had followed the little ark the ark and the bulrushes to see what would happen to her brother. And so she pops up and she says, "Shall I go and seek for you a nursing mother?" And when the daughter of Pharaoh says yes, then she says, she goes and gets her Moses' own mother. And when he grows up, I don't know if this is when he's weaned or when, but when he gets to a certain age, he's brought to the daughter of Pharaoh, and that is when she calls him Mashaha. And this word comes from the root mash, which means drawn out. Now, this is really important. I want to emphasize that he's drawn out of the waters. Now, as it said, when he became great, now he knew who he knew who his relatives were. It wasn't like it was a secret. He knew who his relatives were. And so he goes out and he goes forth among his brethren. In the Aramaic Targum, it says, "And in those days, when Mashaha, he went forth to his brethren, and he saw the anguish of their souls and the greatness of their toil." So he observes that his fellow Hebrews are suffering. And when he goes among them, he spies a Matsaraya who is striking a Hebrew. Now, this word is nukaha. And this is not just, a slap. This is not just a slap. This is a smiting, a striking with the intent to kill. So when Mashaha happens upon this Mitzrayim person who is brutally beating one of Mashaha's male relatives, this person was related to Mashaha in some way, so he's probably a Levite. So Mashaha strikes the Mitzrayah, that's that word again, Nukaha, and he conceals the body in the sand. So we happen upon another day, and two Hebrews are quarreling. And when Mashaha reprimands the wrongdoer replies, and of course the Targum, the Aramaic Targum, says this is Dathan. And this guy, he causes a lot of trouble and controversy later. But Dathan, who is the wrongdoer, he's the one who says, "Who made you?" As in, established you as a Yashar, which means noble man, and Shafat, that is a judge, over us. Do you intend to harag, murder me as you murdered the Mitzrayah? Now, did Mashaha commit murder? A lot of people, I've heard preachers who preach that Moses committed murder. Did he? Well, now this word, harag, it carries the meaning of not only just private homicide, but of an enemy who is killed in war. Now, the prohibition that we see later in SHAMA'UATH, chapter 20, it says, "No ratzach," which is more what Cain did to Abel. It is the idea of crushing or breaking. And it is also related to the word ratzaha, which means to take delight in or pleasure in. So did Mashaha commit such a crime? Did he crush this person and take pleasure in it? That is questionable. I think he was probably, defending his male relative. But of course, it would have had to have been judged by the bearded ones, that is, the elders of Yasharel. Of course, Pharaoh, the king of Mitzrayim, he certainly thought that Moses had done something worthy of death, and so he sought to execute Mashaha. So that's my notes there on that little section. So back to you, Noel.
Without going into any extra biblical books, it seems to me that Pharaoh was like, he almost saw, like, I almost would read this be like he sees an opportunity. Like he wants to remove, he never liked Moshe. we're not talking about the Prince of Egypt here, right? We're like two brothers, type of thing. But like where he never liked Moshe. It was a political thing. He's like, I got my opportunity. I mean, think about this. I mean, you're a pharaoh of Egypt. You can kill whoever you want. You're one of his high appointed people. You can go out there and you can execute. I would think you could just execute justice, right? You would. I mean, if you got like taskmasters out there beating people, right? They're not going to be called in by Pharaoh. Oh, that's you beat someone to death. You're being put down now. I don't necessarily see that happening. And so with Moshe, I just think, we have opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're probably correct because, like you said, he was supposed to be the son or the daughter of Pharaoh, which would have made him royalty. And he couldn't, because she drew him out of the river, they would have thought that he was a gift from the gods, so to speak. And so it was probably a political thing. So he's like, oh, wow, here's my chance, because it's like, as you say, he was seizing the opportunity. It wasn't probably, oh, this is my brother and my friend. No, it was probably, oh, wow, this is a great opportunity to get rid of this guy and have him executed.
I could probably find passages too where it talks about, the righteous find company with the righteous, the wicked with the wicked think the righteous are wicked, and so on and so forth. The idea is that Pharaoh had clearly known. They had clearly known that he was a Hebrew. They saw it from the time he was in the basket, pretty self-evident. But it was almost like that moment where they really truly realized, oh, you're not one of us. Like you're sticking up for the Hebrews. You're not one of us. You're a threat now. You got to be gone. All right, so let's look. I wanted to look really quickly at the zeal of Levi. Of course, Moshe is from the tribe of Levi. And this is interesting here. This is in the Aramaic Targum. I'll just read what's highlighted here. This is where Moshe kills the man. Now, this is according to the Aramaic Targum. It says, Moshe turned and considered in the wisdom of his mind and understood that in no generation would there arise a proselyte from that Mitzrayim man, and that none of his children's children would ever be converted. I kind of think that's a little interesting because, well, not just a little, it's very interesting because I've been over this several times before, that the same thing happens when Allah Hayam approaches Cain after killing Abel, and it's this idea that now many voices have been silenced that are expected in generation after generation after generation. And so according to this passage, Moshe in this moment is seeing the same thing, where he's seeing that there's going to be all these generations coming from this wicked man, and not one of them are going to be righteous. So a little interesting there. All right, the next comes from, this is the Testament of Levi. And we're going to see that he also kind of similar things happening with him. And I slew Shechem first. I actually went over this last week. And this is with the rape of Dinah, his sister. And I slew Shechem first. And Simon slew Chamor. And after this, my brothers came and smote that city with the edge of the sword. And my father heard these things and was wroth. And he was grieved in that they had received the circumcision. And after that had been put to death. And in his blessing, he looked amiss upon us. So if you recall, when Yaakov is dying, he and his brother, those were the two, he kind of, to his dying day, he looked down at what they did. For we sinned because we had done this thing against his will. And he was sick on that day. And I find that fascinating. So in Levi here, he's like, what Levi is still to his dying day, he's like, this is a righteous thing that we did. It was sin because we went against our father's will. But as you can see here, verse 6, but I saw that the sentence of Elohim was for evil upon Shechem, for they sought to do to Sheraha or Sarah and Rivkah as they had done to Dinah our sister. But Yahuwah prevented them. So in the same sense, when he goes in, and kind of like Moshe, according to the Aramaic Targum, when Levi is going in and just massacring the city of Shechem, he's having the same sort of divine vision where he sees all their evil thoughts and how wicked they truly are. He can like see into their heart. And so kind of going back, I guess, Pamela, what you're saying is that I guess that's the big difference, right, between killing and murder, right? And it's the intents and all that. So
yeah.
All right, so this comes from Numbers 25, and this is Phinehas. Who is Phinehas? He is the grandson of Aaron the priest, another Levite. Famous scene. This, of course, includes Balaam finally trying to curse Israel, or cause them to sin, more like it. He had to actually bless Israel in the end. And behold, one of the children of Yashua came and brought into his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moshe, and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Yasharel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. Long story short, he runs the javelin through the man and the woman and thrusts them about the camp. Another interesting scene happens in 1 Maccabees chapter 2. And in those days arose Mattathias. This is he's the son of Yochanan, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Yoreb from Jerusalem. So he is a Levite. He has 5 sons: Yonan, called Caddis, Simon, called Thasi, Yehuda, who was called Maccabees, like Yehuda Maccabees, Eleazar, and Jonathan. And I want to skip ahead here to the scene. So we know he's a very zealous man for the Torah. He's a Levite. Now, this governor, this Greek governor, Alexander the Great, dies. You know, the kingdom is divided up. This bad dude comes in, and he said, well, let me see. I'll start here. So let's see. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city Modin to make them sacrifice. So the king's officers are coming in now, and he wants them to sacrifice an unclean sacrifice to an Elohim other than Yahuwah, either to the king or to any of their gods. And when many of Yashua came into them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. So the sons of the Maccabees. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on the wise, "Thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in the city." So he looks straight at him, this very zealous Levite. He wants to make an example out of him. "And strengthened with sons and brothers. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandments, like as all the heathen have done." Actually calls them the heathen, the goyim. "Yea, and the men of Yehuda also, and also as remain at Jerusalem." So he's saying, look, all the other Jews have done it. They've all done this now. They've all sacrificed. Just it's your turn now. Just set an example for everyone. You're a great man, and then more will follow your example. "So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards." Then see, that would just take me off. That would cause me to like he might have me until he said that he'd be numbered amongst the king's friends. You have gold and silver and many. I'd be like, that's it. I'm revolting. Then Mattathias answered and spoke with a loud voice, "Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to the commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers." And that'd be the covenant of Yahuwah. Allah Hayam forbade that we should forsake the Torah and the ordinances. "We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left." And this is the interesting thing here. He's incessant when he sees this happen next. He just said, "I am not selling out the Torah or my covenant with Yahuwah for gold or riches or fame or friendship with the king or anything," which was all empty promises anyways. "Now when he had left speaking these words, there came out of the Yahudim in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. Which thing, when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal." So he sees this other man just step right up there to make the sacrifice. "And his reins trembled, neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew this man upon the altar," just like Phinehas. "Also the king's commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down." And then all hell breaks loose, and we get into the Maccabean revolt. All right. So let's continue. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to talk about here. I'm going to wait on this. You didn't see that picture. All right. SHAMA'UATH, chapter 2, 16 through 61. I'm going to go ahead and um, I'll break it up, Pamela, and we'll see what notes you have. It happened that the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. As you recall, Moshe is now on the run. And if you if you read Yasher, there's like probably 10 to 20 chapters in here where Moshe lives the life of Forrest Gump, and he becomes like the king of this whole country, and just tons of stories in there. And so finally he goes off. He's no longer king of this other country, and he goes off to the priest of Midian. And remember now, Midian was one of the sons of Abraham with what was her name, Pamela? His after Sarah.
Keturah.
Yeah. Midian is one of their sons. So now, which is kind of interesting because I speculate that Keturah was that according to the Jewish tradition, she was Hagar with a new name. I don't really buy that. It could be true. I take it.
Well,
go ahead.
The name, we think of it as a name, Hagar. It's not a name. It means the stranger. It's not a name. So they've been calling her in Bereshith. They call her Hagar, Hagar, Hagar. And we see it when Mashahah names his son. He names him Garasham, which is stranger. The root word of that is gar, which is stranger. And so her name might have been Keturah because it's not really given in Bereshith. It's Hagar, the stranger. It's not a name. It's just I get as a description. So yeah, it could be.
Yeah. I put there, Polly. I put Keturah there, and but when I'm live on the spot, I can't always remember all the names. But anyways, the point was that it's possible too that she came from Abimelech, a daughter of Abimelech, and that comes, of course, directly from the writings of Abraham, which would mean that Abimelech, according to that text, was a Melchizedek priest. And so is it possible that the priest of Midian is a continuation of the Melchizedek priesthood? Just throw that out there. I don't know. I wasn't there, but it's something I think about. And these girls came to draw and fill the watering troughs to give drink to their father's sheep. I think this is one of those great scenes where I can see Charlton Heston, jumping in to save the day, to save the beautiful young daughters of the priest of Midian. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Mashahah stood up and delivered them and watered their sheep. So when they returned to Reuel, their father, he asked, "How is it that you have returned so quickly today?" They answered him, a Mitzrayim man protected us from the hand of the shepherds and also drew and gave water to our sheep. Then he replied to his daughters, "Where is he? Why have you left the man there? Invite him and let him eat bread." Then Mashahah began to stay with the man who gave Zepharah, or we know as Zipporah, his daughter to him. And she bore a son, and he called his name Gerashom. For, he said, "I am a stranger in a foreign land." A long time after these events, the king of Mitzrayim died. But the children of Yashrael were still oppressed in their servitude, and their cries from their slavery reached Allahayam. Allahayam therefore remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Yitzchak and with Yaakov. Therefore Allahayam looked upon the children of Yashrael, and Allahayam revealed himself. Mashahah, however, was shepherding the sheep of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he had led the sheep to the far side of the desert and came to the mountain of Allahayam in Charabaha, where Malak, like kind of like the angel or messenger, Malak Yahuwah, the ever-living, appeared unto him in a flame of fire. Now, I'm going to read this whole passage, and I am definitely going to be, I kind of threw my hands up in the air when I do every time I study this. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I'll be interested to hear how you dissect this, Pamela. Anyways, he appeared unto him in a flame of fire in a thorn bush. Now, I'll quickly point out, you can see Pamela puts a little number 1 here. So let's read the bottom of the page, what it says. The word in Paleo Hebrew, sanuha, means tooth or crag. A more appropriate translation would be thorny crag. So we say it's a thorny bush, but Pamela's saying it should be a thorny crag. So you think a crag like kind of like a jagged, rocky cliffside. It has been traditionally translated as bush, which is possible considering the word begins with the Paleo-Hebrew samak. If the English word bush is used, then it should be interpreted as thorn bush. All right. Got to go back up here and find that number 1 again. When he looked, he observed that the thorn bush burned with fire, yet the thorn bush was not consumed. Then Mashaha declared, I will draw near and examine this great wonder, why the thorn bush is not burnt up. But Yahuwah saw that he approached to examine it. So Ha-Alahayam called out to him from the midst of the thorny crag. Let's see, we see number 2 here. Sometimes translated from the midst of the bush. Okay. So she put here, it could be, usually it translates to me from the midst of the thorny bush, but Pamela says that Ha-Alahayam called out to him from the midst of the thorny crag and said, Mashaha, Mashaha. And he answered, I am here. Now, I'll quickly remind you that the other 2 times this happened in Bereshith. One was to Abraham, and I think it's Yahuwah who calls out to him there. It could be Alahayam, but he says, Abraham, Abraham, and he says, I am here. And immediately we learn that he has to be put to the test with Yitzhak, right? So anytime you get like the name calling and then the response, I'm here, it's a big deal. The other time is with when Yahuwah appears to Yaakov and he says, I am here. So if that happens to you and you hear the Most High call your name out and you say, I am here, be prepared for something big. And then he said, approach not. Put off your shoes from your feet, for the place upon which you stand is Kudash. Then he continued, I and Alahaya of your father, the Alahaya of Abraham, the Alahaya of Yitzhak, and the Alahaya of Yaakov. Then Mashaha hid his face, for he feared to gaze upon Ha-Alahayam. Yahuwah then said, I have seen the suffering of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and I have heard their shrieks before their drivers, and I have understood their sorrows. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of Matzarah, and to take them up from that country to a good land, and a spacious, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to replace the Canaanites and the Chathuya and the Amariah and the Amorites, and the Phariziah, that would be the Philistines, I believe, and the Cha-Yua and the Yabahuasaya. For the maybe Pamela on her when she could pronounce this properly. For the cries of the children of Yasharel have now come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Matzar oppressed them. Therefore you must go, and I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Yasharel, up from among Mitzrayim. I was going to say Moshe, but Mashaha. I still want to say Moshe, but Mashaha replied to Ha-Alahayam, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? I actually love that there, because it's like Mashaha, like he obviously to answer the question. I mean, it's like, well, you were raised in the court of Pharaoh, so you're like the best guy to go. But that's not really what he's saying there. I think this is like true humility, where he sees himself as like a nothing. He's like, who am I? Like, yeah, even though like I was like, in the court, right? I was there with Pharaoh. Like I'm a nobody. I think that's what he's saying there. And I don't think he's self-consciously trying to be humble. I think there's he's you're in the presence of Alahayam, right? And so the truth comes out. And that I should lead the children of Yasharel up from the midst of Mitzrayim. He answered, however, because I will be with you. So to answer your question, yeah, you're a nobody, but I'm going to be with you, and that's going to make you a somebody. Therefore go, for I have sent you to lead the people from Mitzrayim, and they shall serve Ha-Alahayam upon this mountain. Then Mashaha said to Ha-Alahayam, supposing I should go to the children of Yasharel and should say to them, the Alahaya of your fathers has sent me to you, and they should ask me, what is his name? What am I to say to them? And Alahayam declared unto Al-Mashaha, Ahaya ha, Ashar Ahaya ha. Hopefully I got that right, Pamela. And there's a note there, number 3. I will exist because I will exist. And of course, most translations will say, I am that I am. But I will exist because I will exist. which is a great name for the Father, isn't it? Just it's like a name that you can't even really. The way I take it, Pamela might have other thoughts, but the way I take it is that the Father has a name that you can't even define his name with the name. Almost, it's like his name is just beyond any meaning. It's like I am that I am. I exist. There's no other really better way to describe him. Let's see, and then we get the name. Wait, where was it? Okay. Like this, therefore, you shall say, Ahayah has sent me to you. And Allahayam further spoke to Mashahat. You shall say thus to the children of Yasharel, Yahuwah, the ever-living Allahayah of your forefathers, the Allahayah of Abraham, the Allahayah of Yitzchak, and the Allahayah of Yaakov has sent me to you. This is my name to time of long duration. And I remember this from age to age. Go and assemble the chiefs of Yasharel and say to them, Yahuwah, the ever-living Allahayah of your fathers, has appeared to me, the Allahayah of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And he declared, I have visited you, and I will save you from the Mitzrayim, from the Mitzrayah. Therefore, I command you to go from among the Mitzrayim, the men of Mitzrayim, to the land of Canaan, and the Chathuia, and the the Amorites, and the Pharisaiah, and the Chadoya, and the Yabahuasiah, to a land flowing with milk and honey, and they will listen to your voice. Then go you and the chiefs of Yasharel to the king of Mitzrayim, and say to him, Yahuwah, the ever-living Allahayah of your servants, has commanded us. Therefore, we pray, let us go 3 days' journey into the Madabar. And I think the note there for number 4 is just wilderness. And offer sacrifices to Yahuwah, our ever-living Allahayah. But I know that the king of Mitzrayim will not permit you to go except by a strong hand. Consequently, I shall stretch out my hand and strike the Mitzrayim with all the wonders that I will do within their bounds. And afterwards, he will send you away. Then I will give this people favor in the eyes of of Mitzrayim, so that it shall be when they walk, they shall not walk unprovided. But every woman shall demand of her neighbor and from the guests in her house ornaments of silver and ornaments of gold and clothing, and put them upon her sons and daughters, and shall strip the Matzariyah. Then Mashahat answered and said, but they may not trust me and not listen to my voice. For they may say, we have never observed Yahuwah, the ever-living, your Allahayam. This is where I'm saying that it seems to me like there was like a scrubbing in Egypt, where by the time, they just had Yosef, and already the Egyptians are like, who's this guy? Who's this Elohim you talk about? Allahayam, however, asked him, what is in your hand? And he replied, a stick. And he then commanded, throw it to the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a nakash, or a serpent. And Mashahat fled from before it. I have to say that after all the research I've been doing on Leviathan recently, and the serpents, and the seven-headed serpent creature, that really tripped me out, especially when understanding what this staff is that he threw down became a nakash. Perhaps it is a discussion for another time. And Mashahat fled from before it. I love that. It becomes a snake, and he runs away into the thorny crag. But Yahuwah, the ever-living, said to Mashahat, stretch out your hand and seize it by the tail. So he stretched out his hand and seized it, and it became a stick in his hand. I'd be like covering my eyes and holding my hand out there. I can't stand snakes. Snakes are the worst thing ever. That making the vision of Moshe's father like a total nightmare with the two watchers, with the asp. Be certain they will believe because of that Yahuwah, the ever-living Allahayah of their fathers, appeared to you. The Allahayah of Abraham, the Allahayah of Yitzchak, and the Allahayah of Yaakov. And Yahuwah, the ever-living, continued speaking to him. Put your hand now into your bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he lifted it out, behold, his hand was struck with leprosy, as white as snow. And he commanded, put again your hand into bosom again. So he replaced his hand in his bosom and took it out again from his bosom, and it returned like his other flesh. And it shall be that if they will not trust you and not listen to your voice, at the first evidence. Yet they will trust to your voice after the second sign. But if they do not trust you, even for the second evidence, and do not listen to your voice, then take some of the water from the river and pour it out on the dry land, and there the water which you have taken from the river shall become blood on the dry ground. Mashaha, however, replied to Yahuwah, the ever-living, but yet Adonai, I am not an eloquent man. I have not been so in the past, nor in this speaking between you and your servant, for I am slow of mouth, difficult to speak, and heavy of tongue, difficult to understand. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Pamela, but really quickly, I have here this passage. There's a very short passage in Jasher, just to comment on his slowness of mouth, and this is what we read. And the context here is that Moshe is a little baby. He's there in front of, he actually reaches for Pharaoh's crown, which is a huge naughty no-no, and the whole court, including Balaam, is like, yeah, that's going to be a problem. And so they're trying to figure out what to do with Moshe. And so we see this. And the king ordered the onyx stone and coal, and this is burning coal, to be brought and placed before Moshe. And they placed the boy before them to see what he would do. Would he go for the stone? They're trying to figure out if he's intelligent, like if he reached for the crown just because it was there, or because he reached for it because he wanted to rule. And they placed the boy before them, and the lad endeavored to stretch forth his hand to the onyx stone. Not good. I think he would have been put to death if he would have done that. But the angel of Yahuwah took his hand and placed it upon the coal, and the coal became extinguished in his hand, and he lifted up and put it in his mouth and burned part of his lip and part of his tongue, and he became heavy in mouth and tongue. And when the king and princes saw this, they knew that Moshe had not acted with wisdom in taking off the crown from the king's head. So the king and princes refrained from slaying the child. So Moshe remained in Pharaoh's house growing up, and Yahuwah was with him. That comes from Yasher 70. Well, let's see. How much further do I have here? It keeps going on. Let me just go ahead and I'll read through the whole thing and then let Pamela comment. But Yahuwah, the ever-living, replied to him, who gave a mouth to man? Or who makes dumb or deaf, or blind or seeing? It is not I, Yahuwah, the living one. So now go, and I will be with your mouth and show you what you shall say. But he answered, indeed, my Adon, send, I pray you, by some other hand. Then Yahuwah, the ever-living, was angry with Mashaha, and he said, have you not a brother, Aaron the Levite, or the La Uaya? I know that he can talk. He is even now coming to seek you. See that you can go cheerfully with him and speak to him and put words into his mouth, for I will be with your mouth and in his mouth, and will show you what you are to do, and he shall speak for you to hit the people. He shall be like a mouth for you, and you shall be to him of Allahayam, and that staff, take it in your hand, for you shall perform wonders with it. Mashaha therefore went and returned to Yather, his father-in-law, that would be Jethro, and said to him, I wish to go now and rejoin my relatives who are in Mitzrayim, and I will see if they are alive. And Yather said to Mashaha, walk to SHAMA'UATH. And let's see here, number 6. The word SHAMA'UATH has a great depth of meaning: wholeness, health, prosperity, peace, and friendship. All right, I think that's a good cutting off point. I'm going to hand it over to you, Pamela, to give your interpretation of this.
All right. So, can you hear me good?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So, I'm going to just jump right into the controversy, because this is going to be kind of some controversial words. Mashaha, he comes to the mountain of Allahayam. Now, he's shepherding his father-in-law's sheep. And as I said, it's going to be a controversy to some people, because I'm going to be tackling, number one, the names. We'll be talking about some of the names. But also tonight, some people may get upset about one of their cherished scenes in Scripture, namely the burning bush. Now, they're at Harabaha, which is Horeb. Now, this is Sinai. This is Mount Sinai. And we are in the same location where Mashaha will return later on in SHAMA'UATH. This time he will be shepherding, but he'll be shepherding the people of Yasharal. Now, this Hebrew word that we talked about, that's translated as bush is sanuha, sanuha. And it can mean bush, but if it means bush, it would be thorn bush. But it can also mean thorny crag, or to lift up, elevated, or to be sharp. Now, if we view this through the lens that all of this is thorny crag, it's not bush, then it is a thorny crag that is elevated, lifted up, or sharp. Now, if we put this, we couple this with this next word, flame of fire. This word for flame is lahab, lahab. Now, this word for flame of fire it's defined as the flashing point of a spear. So we put these together and we have a thorny crag that's lifted up, elevated, sharp, with a flame like the flashing point of a spear. So Mashaha, when he sees this, he makes an interesting statement. He says, I'm going to draw aside and examine this great wonder, why this thorn bush, thorny crag, is not burned up. Now, the phrase that he uses here is Ath Hamara Aha Ha Gadol, the wonder, the great. This is not just, this cute little idea of a little bush crackling with a few flames. He would have had to have been able to see it from a distance. And also when he saw it, when he observed this, it created a sense of wonder, a great wonder inside of him, so that he felt compelled to turn aside. And just as he was drawn out of the water by the daughter of Pharaoh, in this time, he's drawn out by the Ruach HaKodesh. Now, I want to look at this word for fire. I want this flame of fire. Now, the Ruach HaKodesh is often associated with fire. We've read this passage in Acts, the book of Acts, concerning the day of Pentecost, when the Ruach fell like fire, and it rested on the followers of Mashiach. Well, the one that I really want to look at is actually from the Shem Tov version of the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, and it's chapter 3, verse 11. And John answered all of them. He said, Behold, I truly baptize you in the days of repentance, but another comes, mightier than I, and the thong of whose sandal I am not worthy to unfasten. He will baptize you with the fire of the Ruach HaKodesh. Now, those words of the is not in the text. It's not in the Hebrew. It actually, fire Ruach HaKodesh. So we see in the Gospel of Matthew that the Ruach HaKodesh is associated with fire. Now, so the Ruach is herself that flame of fire. That's my position. So he makes this interesting statement. I will draw aside and I will examine this great wonder, why this thorny crag is not burned up. Now, he's drawn in by the rock, and I'm going to read a few scriptures. This also comes from the Gospels. This is from the Gospel of John, and this actually comes from the Peshitta Bible, which is a translation that comes to us from an Aramaic manuscript. And so in John 6:44, we're seeing Yeshua or Yahshua, he's speaking. He says, No man can come to me unless the Father who sent me shall attract him, and I will raise him at the last day. And also in John 6:64, it says again, this is again from the Peshitta, and he, that is Yeshua, he said to them, On account of this, I told you that no man can come to me unless it be given to him of my Father. And in John 14:6-7, Yeshua or Yeshu says to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No man cometh unto me unless cometh unto the Father unless by me. So just as Mashaha was drawn out of the water he's drawn in with this great wonder. Now, I think that it's a foreshadowing. He's going to bring them back to this mountain of Al-Hayam. And later on in SHAMA'UATH, this is later on down, it says that Yahweh the Everliving, he descended the mountain in fire. Now, when next we have Yahweh, he saw, and Ha-Al-Hayam called out. Now, then he said, and the question is, who said? Well, the last person who talked was identified as Ha-Al-Hayam. And then he continued, we assume that it is the same speaker. And Mashaha hid his face, for he feared to gaze upon Ha-Al-Hayam. And why am I pointing this out? I want you to understand that it's not just Yahweh or Malach Yahweh that's here in the scene. The Al-Hayam, the Father, is here. Yahweh is here, the Son. And also in the flame of fire, the Ruach HaKodesh. So we have all of these who are present and speaking. Now, I'm going to tackle something that has caused a great deal of confusion. It is about the names. The names of Father, the name of the Son, the name and character of the Son. Many English translations have used, they took out the Hebrew, and the transliterations that they did put in weren't done very well. And they inserted this God and Lord, and they used them indiscriminately. So people have rightly so been confused into thinking that this is the Father that has worked out. But I'm going to try to tackle some of this confusion. Now, the first one that we're going to tackle is the word all, which is Alf Lamed, all. Now, this is in the Paleo, it carries the idea of a powerful leader or a chief shepherd. Now, the person that's designated by this term all, it just means someone who has power and authority. Humans can carry this. If you noticed, Mashaha, that is Moses, was called Al-Mashaha, which means that he was given, divinely given, power and authority. Aaron, later on, you will see Aaron called Al-Aharon. And even Pharaoh, a couple of times, he's designated as Al-Pharaoh. And this is the king of course, Mitzrayim. And so you understand that it's a title. All is a title, and it means mighty one, a mighty one. Now, the next one that I want to look at is Al-Hayam. Now, when I'm trying to designate that it's Father, the Father, I put it in all caps. But of course, in Hebrew, there's no capitalization. So I'm just doing this to give clarity, to try to give clarity. I want you to know that this is the word that's pronounced in the modern Israeli Hebrew is Elohim. Al-Hayam, there are Strong's Dictionary and many other dictionaries just calls it powers, just powers. And Father is Al-Hayam. The Son is an Al-Hayam. Usually when I put that it's the Son, I have a capital A and then the rest in lowercase. But there are many, many Al-Hayam. I try to put all that in lowercase. There is even a council or assembly of the Al-Hayam. Now, I want to read to you, this is a translation from the book of Psalms. And this is actually, I feel like it's Yahweh as the chief Al-Hayam. He is in this assembly of the Al-Hayam. And he's sort of giving them their orders, if you will, what they're supposed to be doing. So this is Psalm 82, a Mizmor of Asaph. And it says, Al-Hayam takes a stand, that means he's established, in the assembly of the mighty ones. He judges in the midst of the Al-Hayam. Until when will you judge depravity, iniquity, and wickedness? How long will you distort justice and accept the face of wicked criminals, the guilty, the condemned, and lift him up? Salah. Judge the powerless, the feeble, whose strength hangs by a thread, and the wretched poor, the orphan bereaved of father, and those suffering want. Render to them justice. Cause the weak to escape smoothly, and snatch the oppressed from the hand of the unrighteous ones. They do not acquire knowledge. They do not understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of Arats totter and shake. Even I, have declared, as you are Al-Hayam and sons of Al-Yawan, all of you. But like Adam, you shall die, and like one of the noble ones, you shall fall. Rise up, Al-Hayam, judge Ha'arat, for you shall receive an inheritance among the nations. So the son, Al-Hayam, he's judging among this assembly of the Al-Hayam. And we also have, of course, we noticed in SHAMA'UATH, we have the Benuya Al-Hayam, or the sons of Al-Hayam. Now, the crimes of Genesis 6 were committed by the Benuya Al-Hayam. Now, I'm going to bring up something. This is from the book of Deuteronomy. It says in the book of Deuteronomy 32, it says, I think it's verse 8, when Al-Yawan, or the Most High, received as an inheritance the nations, in separating the sons of Adam, he established the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the Benuya Al, or the sons of Al-Hayam, or sons of the mighty ones. Now, if you look in most of your English translations, I think the RSV is one of the ones that does not say this, but most English translation will say according to the number of the sons of Yasharel. Now, Michael Heiser actually does a really good teaching on this. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says the sons of Al-Hayam, or sons of the mighty ones. It was changed. The Masoretic was changed to read sons of Yasharel. So, like I said, there are many Al-Hayam. I mean, you think about how many deities Egypt had. Think about how many deities that the Greek had, and the Romans. And unfortunately, a lot of these things represent an actual entity that existed. And there are also, besides these Benuya Al-Hayam, we also have Al-Hayam Acharayam. And these are secondary Al-Hayam. These are ones who followed after. They're second-rate Al-Hayam. They don't equal up to Al-Hayam the father, or Al-Hayam the son, who is Yahweh. Now, another name that is also has been used as a tool for division and contention, and it is Yahweh. Now, this name comes from the word Ha'uaha, which means simply to breathe. He will breathe. And it is synonymous with Hayaha. And we see that in Exodus 3:14. We said it's Ahayaha, Ashar, Ahayaha. So Hayaha is synonymous. It's equal to Ha'uaha. And it means to exist. It is also the word Ha'uaha is related to SHAMA'UATH, which means to turn aside, to lodge, to settle down, or to desire. So, like I said, we're currently in this season of polarization. You have people who are questioning the identity of Yahweh, and you have these polar opposites. And they're saying, who is he? What is his character? And as Noah said, there are people who are out there who are saying, he's not the good guy. But of course, my position is that Yahweh is the son of Elohim. Now, Pharaoh asked, who is Yahweh, the ever-living, and why should I listen to his voice to send out Yasharal? I know not Yahweh, and also I will not send away Yasharal. And so many people, even today, they are stumbling and they're falling away because they do not listen to Yahweh. They do not know his character. They confuse his character with that of these other Elohim. Like I said, those Benuya Elohim, they're the ones who committed the crimes in Genesis 6. And these Elohim, Akarayim, these who are the ones who followed after. These are the second-rate Elohim. And they are entities, very, very powerful entities, and people worship them. People worship them even today. But, of course, they are not the Elohim of Yasharel. And we're going to see this epic battle between Yahweh and these deities of Mitzrayim. Now, I meant to say this earlier. The word Mitzrayim, it means in the Paleo, bitter enemy from across the sea. And they're characterizing what these are to them. These Egyptians are bitter enemies across the sea. And so these Elohim of Mitzrayim are their enemies of Yahweh. And there was a young lady tonight in our pre-presentation chat, and I was actually told her I'd be bringing up this one. Some people say, well, how can it be? Doesn't this verse, I get a lot of this, doesn't this verse say, or that verse say? A lot of times, these verses that seem to be contradicting Yahweh as the Savior, it's because they're kind of mistranslated. One such is in Isaiah 44:6. Like this declares Yahweh, Malach of Yasharel, that's king of Yasharel, and his kinsman redeemer. So he's the kinsman redeemer of Yasharel. Yahweh Zaba'oth, that's Yahweh of the armies. I, the first, I, the last, and without me there is not present any Elohim. So you cannot reach the Father without Yahweh. And even these secondary, Elohim, even they are dependent upon him because he is their chief. And so he actually says, my firstborn is Yasharel. I think you did a study, did you not, on it about that Yasharel, Jacob, was created first. And so, that's a powerful statement. He's my firstborn. Let him go. Let my firstborn go, that he may serve me in the wilderness. So he reveals himself in fire on Mount Sinai in this thorny crag. And I wish you could, what I'm picturing in my mind, this thorny crag, but also you've got this flame of fire, and it's pointing upwards. It's pointing upwards. And so you've got all three of them there. You've got the Father, Elohim. You've got the Son, Yahweh. And I hope you saw that play of conversation. And we have of course, the Ruach HaKodesh, and she's associated with fire. And so I hope I've kind of cleared up some of the. I feel like I've taken up too much time, but I did want to. This is a great place to do it. Ahayaha means I will exist. Ashar, because Ahayaha, I will exist. So as you say, Father, Alahayam, people want to put him on a box. They want to make him very small. And I feel like that's one of the things with the bush. It's like trying to make Alahayam, trying to make Yahweh very small. Make him small. But it says specifically, it was a great wonder. So I feel like Yahweh being the Son actually makes the Father greater and more intense than what I ever thought of when I thought that, Jehovah was the Father. I feel like there's so much more going on here. So, well, give it to you. I feel like I've had more than my fair share, but
this is perfect. I mean, and we're coming up to the end, and people every week I get these emails and they have all these questions they want to know from Pamela, the translator. And this is great that people, are able to see you and hear, where your thoughts are in this document. And what you brought up tonight with we were talking beforehand in the pre-show on Discord about this idea of Yahweh always being the Son, that, Yahweh, Jehovah, so on and so forth, is not the Father as is advertised to us. That's the way I was raised. That's the way we were all raised to think that, and how this comes into so much more clarity now. And I had mentioned that the big one for me is what you had mentioned in Deuteronomy, where it says that the land, the earth was divided up amongst the 70, and that Yahweh gets Israel, right? And I always used to look at that and go, wait. So the Father he creates everything, and then he gets this little section of land. Like, when I saw, Yahweh and that this is the Son, I'm like, okay, boom, this makes so much more sense. But somebody else mentioned in the pre-discussion, and he was absolutely right, is that when Yahushua HaMashiach goes and says that Moshe wrote of me, that's where everyone starts freaking out. They start scrambling through the Bible. Where is Yahushua spoken about in here? Where's he at? And it's like, oh, he's Yahweh. That's who Moshe is speaking about. He's everywhere. He's like in almost every conversation and almost every paragraph. He's just like the whole storyline is him. Yahushua HaMashiach is Yahweh. So yeah. Now, Pamela, we've got like 10 minutes left before I like to close shop. I can go a little bit over. Is there anything I can go ahead and read some more, or is there anything else you want to?
That was the main thing that I wanted to tackle. Was number one about a thorny crag instead of some of the meanings of the world, but I also wanted to. I really wanted to. Polly said every time it says the word, he is Debar Yahweh. Word Yahweh. He's Malak Yahweh. And when you see that Yahweh is actually the Son, everything, as you say, it fell into place for me. When I finally came to that realization, I didn't come to that realization on my own. I feel like the rock led me there, and everything fell in place. And it makes so much more sense. You understand what's going on, that in a lot of ways, he goes into Mitzrayim. He wants his children. He wants his people back. This is my nation. This is my inheritance. I want them back. And of course, Pharaoh says, I don't know this guy. I don't know who he is, and I'm not letting him go. So that was what I really wanted to to discuss because I'm trying to clear up some of the confusion that we've inherited. We've inherited confusion about who the Father is, who the Son is, because of this use of God and Lord and that sort of thing in this generic terms, for what is clearly it's clearly in the manuscripts. It's clearly there in the words, and it's just been obscured. And I feel like now's the time the books are being opened up. Now he's revealing himself, and he's moving and he's acting, and it's exciting times. So that's me. That's most of what I had. So
I put out a video earlier this week talking. The name of the video was SHAMA'UATH, and it was in my Leviathan studies. And at the ending of it, I'm reading from a chapter from Bezorah Nicodemus, or the Gospel of Nicodemus. And it was one of those things. I'm reading all these. It just gave me chills when the whole book talks about Yahushua HaMashiach, but then as he enters Sheol, it says Yahuwah, or Yahuwah in the flesh entered Sheol. And it's these little things where I read these things for years, and I just kept, there was like this, the pre-programming in me go, oh, that can't be true. That can't be true. And it must be a reference to something else. Like he's a representative of Yahuwah or Yahuwah or whatever, right? But then it's one of those things where like, you just take it at its word. And I don't want to accuse him when like they're not taking its word, but I think we really were all pre-programmed into this, where we read these biases into it, and we have to kind of recognize that these are biases. And when you just take it at its word, you're like, okay, that's not actually what it says, Pamela is the one that I think I gave this story before. I'll go ahead and give this now. We'll just close on this. For everyone waiting for me to finish the Torah portion, there's a little bit left. I'm just going to pick it up where we left off next week and just kind of and go through it, because there's some important stuff I want to talk about in there. We got a couple minutes left. And it was, the story goes that I was having a conversation with like 2 or 3 people within 1 week, where they brought this up to me. They're like, hey, Noel, what do you think about Yahuwah actually being Yahusha, HaMashiach, the Messiah? And I'm like, no, he always the Father. Like, no, there's no way, no. And then they kind of give the point to me. But when I've learned that when like 2 or 3 of these things from different sources that are not connected all come at one time, sometimes that's like, I need to listen. I need to stop and go, okay, this theme keeps coming up. I need to listen to this. So I approached Pamela on the side, because Pamela has become like a kind of a Paleo Hebrew research partner. And I go, okay, Pamela, don't freak out or anything. I'm not saying this, but like I'm hearing these, actually these people actually came to my house actually, and they were sitting in my back in their porch, and they're talking to me about this. And I was like, there's these people out there saying that, Yahuwah is actually the Son, and he's not the Father. And I'm not saying that, but what do you, and she actually just said, well, that's what I believe. I'm like, what? I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this? And so that's when we brought her on with Michael last April. The video's still up, and I asked them questions, and they kind of went through. Michael at that time was just investigating this. I don't even know where he's at right now. I was at the fence then, but I became convinced soon afterwards. So with that, I think we're going to close tonight. And again, thank you everyone for coming out to this event and listening in. And I love that Pamela was here to talk. I would love to bring on more guests week after week. It's actually hard finding people that we're kind of a like mind that we can come in and talk together. So thank you, Pamela, for this. And she is you, of course. I won't speak about you in the third person. You are welcome to come on anytime you want. This is your baby. This is your translation. I'm excited to get this out. Exodus, this book should be available for sale maybe in the next week. I mean, really soon, right around the corner. We're going to get this for sale, and you guys can pick it up in the store, help support Pamela and her translation. She still has 3 more books of the Torah to finish, but she finished the first 2. And yeah, so thank you, Pamela, for coming on.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this opportunity. And I thank everyone who were listening, and thank you for being open-minded and not coming at me with pitchforks and torches and things like that. I appreciate that you listen, and even if you don't agree, that you listen respectfully, and that means a lot. I think that's what sets the Unexpected Cosmology Fellowship apart, is the fact that they're really kind, and they're really open-minded, willing to listen to someone's position when they when they speak. Polly says he's sharpening his pitchfork now. Oh, Polly.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Shabbat shalom. And I'll be stopping this video. And then in about 5 minutes, I'm going to start up the late show tonight. I'll be finishing, hopefully y'all willing, I'll be finishing my reading through sea serpents. So see you guys over there. And good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night.